And the recording is on, we can start. Jean-Marie, I think you're muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, now we can hear you, but we cannot see you. So if you can just turn on your camera again.
Okay.
Yes, perfect.
Good. So I think we can start the webinar. So good morning and welcome to the webinar Ocean Energy Progress in Europe that is co-hosted by the H2020 OceanSET project and the European Technology and Innovation Platform for Ocean Energy, in short, ETIP Ocean. My name is Gianmaria Sennino, and I'm the chair of the implementation working group for Ocean Energy of the European SET Plan. And today I have the privilege to moderate this webinar from Rome. This one-hour event will feature speakers from OceanSET project, the European Commission, and Ocean Energy Europe. It will provide an update of the ocean energy activity across Europe and outline how the sector could evolve toward meeting ambitious European deployment goals. We will start the webinar with Patricia Kominski from the Sustainable Energy Authority of Ireland, who will present the OceanSET second annual report findings. Then Matthias Sode from the DG Research and Innovation of the European Commission will talk about the new European Commission targets for the ocean energy sector. And finally, Lotta Pirtima from Ocean Energy Europe will give us a vision of the ocean energy sector in 2030. During the presentation, the participants will be able to ask questions to the three speakers via the chat option. These will be written questions and not audio questions. So please remember to specify the name of the speaker before to make a question. So you can also use the number 1, 2, and 3 to indicate the speakers. All the questions will be read at the end of the three presentations during the Q&A session. The entire webinar will be recorded and posted online afterwards. So, but before to start with the three presentations, just let me give you just a very quick overview of the Ocean Energy Implementation Working Group and the OceanSET projects. So these are, I mean, the three presentations, and but as I told before, let me just give you some information about the SET plan. So the SET plan is the European Strategic Energy Technology Plan that is a sort of technology pillar of the European Commission. And in other words, the SET plan is just a key tool for the for aligning priorities. As you can see from these slides, the SET plan has identified 6 priorities, or we can say 6, let's say, ambitious. One of these ambitions is to become the world #1 in renewable energy. And among these, let's say, renewable technologies, the European Commission has identified also the ocean energy. Of course, why also ocean energy? Because our oceans are fast becoming the new arena for renewable energy production, not only for floating solar PV or wind, but also for wave and tidal energy. And for wave and tidal energy, the European Commission has set very ambitious target. And to help reaching this target, the European Commission has created a specific implementation working group that is composed by focal point representative of a large number of member states, European Commission, and the main European ocean energy stakeholders, ETIP Ocean, the European Energy Research Alliance, and Ocean Energy Europe. In March 2018 has been published by the implementation working group the first, let's say, the first implementation plan in which there are, set targets and action, 11 action. The implementation working group has also to monitor the evolution of the ocean energy sector at member state level. So this is why today we are here, also to bring to you the, let's say, the outcome of this monitoring at European level. And to help the implementation working group, the European Commission has also set in the ocean, let's say, H2020 project. So the OceanSET project is helping the implementation working group to deliver all the work to get toward the European Commission. So, but after this very quick overview of the set plan and implementation working group for the ocean energy, we can start our 3 presentations. So the first presentation will be given by Patricia Kominski. Patricia is the Ocean Energy Program Manager of the Sustainable Energy Authority in Ireland. So Patricia, the floor is yours. You have 10 minutes for your presentation. And as I told before, all the questions will be made at the end of the 3 presentations. Patricia, please go ahead.
Thanks, Gianna Maria. I'm just going to share my screen now, if that's okay. I hope you can, let me just see, share content. I hope you can see that.
Yes, perfect.
Okay, great. Thanks, Gianna Maria. Yeah, as Gianna Maria mentioned, we are working on a project called the OceanSET project, which is looking at mapping and reporting on the progress of the activities in member states against the actions of the SET plan and the implementation plan that was established for ocean energy. This is a European Horizon 2020 project. There's 9 partners on the project, and I suppose there's very good engagement across the partners on this particular piece to look at how we can pull together information right across the EU to understand how each member state is supporting and developing this sector. So just to give you an update on progress to date, and I suppose a little bit of background on the OceanSET project. We are midway through it. This is the 2nd year report. We have 1 final year report to do. And this is primarily looking at the initial phase of the implementation plan. So the initial, I suppose, phase where it's more of a planning stage. And we are very much focused on looking at the progress across Europe on supporting the ocean energy sector. The project itself is broken in across a number of work packages, and we have, as I said, strong engagement across the partnership on delivering those work packages. How we generally work year on year is we go through a kind of an iterative process. So we start off by mapping the data that we want to collect, analyzing that data, monitoring what we've seen, and a review which then feeds back into the mapping process to understand where the gaps might be from the data collected in that year. Because it tends to take, I suppose, quite a bit to gather, a bit of time to gather this information, we do work kind of on retrospective years. So for instance, for this 2nd year report, we're reporting on activities from 2019. So our 1st year was 2018. And that was reported last year, our 2nd year 2019, and our 3rd year will be 2020. So we will be issuing the surveys out to member states this year for last year's data, and it will be reported on next year. So it does feel like a long lead-in time, but there is a lot of kind of time required in extracting the information, and often in trying to understand, like for instance, where there might be a number of partners on a project. how that interaction happens at a member state level and a European level. Like we often spend a lot of time trying to reduce or remove duplicate information out of our data sets. So there is quite a considerable amount of work in trying to get a clean and representative data set for each year. We tend to focus on 4 types of information, and these are aligned with the SET plan actions. So general, where we're looking at policy support and policy development, and that's kind of qualitative data. Then we look at technical, so we are looking at the individual technologies and how they're establishing against a number of key metrics and how they're being developed against them. Financial information, what kind of supports are being provided by member states, and then, environmental data. And we have kind of 2 steps where we approach the member states initially to gather all of the information that they would have on a specific year and period to understand the projects that they funded in that period. And then basically any of the projects that are over TRL 7 that have been identified by the member states as being over TRL 7, we approach those projects directly via the member state, and we ask for additional, more specific information, generally around those higher metrics and looking at CapEx, OpEx, LCOEs of projects. So this is some of the information that was gathered from the 2019, and this is all available in the report, which is on the OceanSET website, so oceanset.eu. And basically in 2019, what we found was that there was 127 active projects in that period. The year previously, we had found 90 projects active. So this was, I suppose, this was a good indication of continued support in the area. In the 127 for this year or for this period, we actually looked at European projects as well as member state projects because we found that was a gap in the previous year. And there was a number of projects that were significant contributors to supporting the sector that we hadn't gathered information on. So we included European projects in this year's reporting. And the value of those projects was quite significant. Now, the other thing we looked at this year, because we had found that in the 2018 reporting, we focused solely on the year period. And it was quite difficult sometimes to get funding information for that period because oftentimes these projects are multi-annual. So what we did look at was the multi-annual element of the projects, but also what was funded in the actual period. So we're reporting on what was funded in the actual period because that kind of is where we have set some of our metrics. But we did gather a lot of information on the investment for projects generally in that period, so across a multi-annual period. And as you can see, there were 74 of the 127 projects, 74 were for wave, 24 were for tidal, and 29 were called other, which is kind of feasibility projects or projects which support the development of the sector. So for instance, this project would be considered another, or the likes of, say, for instance, the Tiger project, which supports the development of tidal technologies, but isn't developing a specific technology. So there was a number of projects, large projects actually, that sat in the other category. The other thing that we found was in that period, in the year period of 2019, there was 42.7 million in public funding donated or contributed towards projects. So that was, and this, we'll talk a little bit more about this because that was tracked against some of the targets in the action plan. 8 member states have a dedicated ocean energy budget. And then 10 member states have test facilities. And what we found with the test facilities was they were adequate across the range. We also, I suppose, reached out to a number of the collaborative projects looking at how test sites can work more closely together and got information from them on understanding where that progress has been made. There was a number of the 10 member states that did respond to the survey. 9 were funding TRL 7+ projects. So again, a good indication that there's there is support for the higher TRL projects as well. And also 9 member states have an ocean energy policy. Now, I should mention here that there are actually 14 member states within the SET plan kind of family, I suppose. The implementation plan for the SET plan is supported by 14 member states. And all 14 member states were reached out to. 13 responded, but 3 indicated that they had no particular funding program for ocean energy projects, and 1 didn't respond. So we did get a good response. We also found that we needed to reach out at times to the regions rather than directly to the national contact points. So we definitely found that once we kept I suppose, trying to contact the relevant people in the sector, we got the information we were looking for. But at times it was a challenge to get that information, and there was a need for considerable chasing at times. We also looked, as I mentioned, at the higher TRL projects, and in total there was 25 higher TRL projects identified in the data that we gathered for the period. There was 23 that were directly related to a technology, and 2 that sat in this other category that I mentioned earlier on. So we didn't necessarily seek specific data from those projects. And what we saw, and again, there's more detail on what came out of these surveys in the report, and it would be worthwhile looking at. But what we saw was that there was some good data being gathered and developed, from these projects. So we did get certainly a lot more traction in this year's survey than we would have done in the previous years. And I think that's because, over time, we're starting to build a little bit more momentum on this project and a little bit more confidence in how the information has been reported. In the first year of our surveys, we definitely had a challenge in developers providing us with information because they weren't confident that it would be reported appropriately, and that, but certainly we were very clear that we were always going to aggregate and anonymize any information that we received so that an individual developer couldn't be identified. So we were always very conscious of that. But in saying that, it has been challenging to get some of this information because some projects just don't have it. And especially when you're focusing on a year period and you're looking at, okay, what happened in that particular year, it can be a challenge because, again, a number of these projects are multi-annual. They may not have some of this data till the project ends, and that may be towards the kind of in later years than when it's been gathered. So again, we are working from a very small base here, so it is quite difficult sometimes to get a real understanding of this information. And at times we were definitely challenged in what we were getting, and ensuring that we were reporting, I suppose, consistent figures. So this is a challenge, and it is something that we would definitely like to discuss with a number of developers to understand how we could better represent this information. There was, as I mentioned, 127 projects, and this is kind of a very high-level breakdown. Again, the report gives more details on the breakdowns of the projects being supported in the different countries as well, so you can get a sense of that. Of the number of projects, if you look here, 58% of them were waves. So there was a high number of wave projects, lower number of tidal. We believe, and again, in the lower TRLs, quite a low number of tidal, higher in the TRL 7+. We believe that obviously some of this indicates the status of that current sector, but also that a lot of the projects they're not necessarily publicly funded anymore. There's a lot of private investment in that sector. So we're possibly not seeing information from the public funders on the projects as a result. But when you look to the value of the projects, the breakdown was pretty even between the two sectors. So the other piece of work that we did, and this was led by Wes, was we looked at the IP funding that had been proposed for this period, and this is in the implementation plan for the SET plan. So basically, a proposed amount of funding was identified for a number of the actions within the SET plan to say, okay, in order to ensure progress, this type of investment should be what's given or by the member states. So we looked across these actions to see, realistically, where are we at? And in particular, action 1.1 and 1.2, which deal with tidal energy systems. What we found was in the period, and we still are waiting for the reporting period 2020, but at the moment it's looking like for the lower TRLs in tidal, the investment is less than was anticipated in the implementation plan. For the higher TRLs, the investment is probably on par of what was anticipated in the implementation plan. But like this figure, it will be interesting to watch it as we receive the data for 2020. When we look at the wave sector, investment is actually higher than what was anticipated in both the TRL 6 and 7 to 9. So I suppose that shows that, obviously the initial predictions of what was required probably were less, we're less informed, but also that there's a requirement for higher investment because of the earlier stage of this technology development. And these are the actions that we're actually working against. So these are the actions that were identified in the implementation plan. And what we do as part of the work is we, review the actions to understand kind of where we're at, but also we review our own activities to understand how well we've done, like, have we gathered enough information to appropriately inform that activity or that action. So this chart kind of gives us an indication of where we as a project are at, more so than where the activity is at. So basically there's been a lot, like we have, I suppose, focused very much on trying to gather this type of information on where the technologies are at. We have done some initial qualitative analysis on the supply chains and logistics and testing infrastructure, and we would have a relatively good understanding of kind of what's on offer in the market. We have been looking at the standards and guidelines for LCOE and technical analysis, and basically a lot of this work has actually been led out of IEA OES, but a number of partners are very involved in it. So it's a piece of work that's kind of happening across a number of different project areas. And then there's other areas where we probably aren't, we haven't gathered enough information around these financial incentives, but there is work starting on the EU Insurance and Guarantee Fund, and I know a number of the industry have been in touch. OEE are leading out on this piece of work on behalf of the project. So I know a number of industry have been in touch and consulted on that piece of work, and we hope to see a report from that later this year. The piece of work on the PCP has been led out by Wave Energy Scotland, and Europe Wave has been developed as a result of a lot of this good work that's happened. And then we are working through these other areas to try and gather more definitive information on where member states are at on their certification and standard development and consenting. So there's some progress being made, but definitely there's areas that we need to continue to address. So overall comments from the data gathered. We definitely received more data this year, and a much more, definitely there was a lot of interest in feeding into the process. And I think, from the member states' perspective, they're seeing value in gathering this information together and providing it to us, and also how that feeds into the likes of the overall SET plan, and kind of back into the Commission, so they can see actually where are the gaps in funding and where are the gaps in projects. So definitely there's been a kind of a continued interest, and we have received more data than we did the previous year. We're also building relationships, so I suppose that allows us to to improve the data gathering, and the fact that I think a number of the industry realize that, again, when the data is presented, it is very much aggregation and anonymized, you know, so again, building that trust with the industry. And as I say, there's good momentum built. But we do want to reduce any reporting challenges. So again, last year we included a spreadsheet for member states to give us the information rather than in a kind of a more fixed survey form. And I think that went quite well and allowed us to do a lot more in-depth analysis on the data. So we'll continue that, and what we plan to do is feed back to the member states the information that they had given us, and then they just need to update or add any projects rather than having to send us a whole new set of projects again. So we do want to look at how we can reduce reporting challenges. The inclusion of the European projects we felt was important to reflect overall activity. And again, what it showed was good collaboration in projects, both in the European projects themselves, but also in the ERANETs. And I think this is something that's really important for us to continue and maintain, especially with the development of the CETP. And the research timelines, I suppose, can differ across projects, and that was a little bit of a challenge to sometimes pull out the information specifically for the period to allow us to do some analysis, but it also gave us a kind of a good understanding overall of the support for the sector, and which I suppose in general the feeling was overall the sector was supported well in 2019. So that's the general outcome I'm feeling. So the next steps for the project, I suppose the survey will go back out to member states, and we'll and they'll have access to the data gathered to date. The data will be gathered on actions not yet sufficiently addressed. So they're some of the actions that I identified in the earlier slide. The working group for the implementation plan on the SET plan is due to look at updating the actions. Some of the actions just need to be updated from the point of view of, I suppose, targeting some of the activities and some of the dates that were in it. So the working group for the implementation plan will be updating that. And we do want to work with developers to try and improve data collection and try and look at how we can get maybe like, I suppose what we are trying to do is get a realistic picture of the current situation, and in particular of data around LCOE. We are definitely struggling with some of the information that's out there, and we do want to engage with the work that's been done at IEA OES to see, can we in any way leverage that work and work more closely to get, to use that data. So we are looking at different ways of collecting this information and getting an understanding of where we really are at against some of the key metrics. And as I mentioned, we are looking to align with other projects. So we definitely are open for suggestions. It is an iterative process. We are trying to ensure that the data that we have reflects the current reality. So very happy to discuss it with anyone in the industry or any of the member states, and or any of our partners are open for further discussion. So the partners are listed there. So please feel free to reach out to us. And as I say, the report is there. It's publicly available on our website, and always open to comments and improvements. Thank you.
Thank you, Patricia. Thank you, Patricia. Very nice presentation. And actually, questions are already coming for you, but I will, give, the questions at the end of the three presentations, but please start to post your questions now, because at the end of the three presentations, there will be a very interesting Q&A session. So we can move now to the second presentation that is done by Matthias Saude from the Commission, who give us, the point of view of the Commission about the ocean energy sector. Thank you. The floor is yours, Matthias. Please go ahead.
Yeah, good morning for everybody. I hope you can see the screen.
Yes.
And let's change this as well. I will try to keep it short. I think a lot of very nice things have been said by Patricia. I think it's very useful as well, the work done by OceanSET. I will come back to it a bit later. First of all, the title of my presentation is 100 megawatts of ocean energy in Europe by 2025, and that's all what we would like to see. But it will be quite tough to reach this target. This target is has been published in our offshore renewable energy strategy in November last year, where we said, okay, where are we now with ocean energy? 13 megawatts in the water, just the EU 27. I saw a question about, is UK included in this?
Sorry, Matthias.
Yeah.
Your presentation is not correctly displayed. I mean, we see all the structure of your presentation. So, okay.
It's better.
It's much better. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, the targets 13 megawatts there is where we are. We would like to go to 1 gigawatt in 2030 and 40 gigawatt in 2050, and we can have nice discussions about that. Is ambitious enough or not? We should do more. But let's take first the first step, and there we have set a target of 100 megawatt, in fact, in 2025. But we have been setting ambitious targets. I think it will be also leading for the member states to see this is where we have to go. And we try to encourage public and private investments in new infrastructure, but also in research to make this all happen. And in the last year and even the last months, getting more and more evident that we have to invest in decarbonization of our economy, thinking about all the industrial processes, and to make use of renewable energy technologies as a main driver. We would like as well to provide a clear and stable legal framework that is possible to happen. And you know, we're preparing different directives, and that is also really supporting the policies which we are targeting. In this full concept, and I'm sorry for the past use this picture because the right part is of the wind, but the full EU is considered. We have different sea basins. We have the Mediterranean, the Black, the Baltic seas, the North and the Atlantic, and different types of resources. But if we would like to have decarbonization of renewable energy technologies, we have to bring it all over in Europe. So we have to consider these different sea basins. But it's also for locked-in countries, landlocked in Australia, Austria, Czech Republic. If you look to the supply chain for renewable energy technologies, it's not just limited to harbor cities or the countries at the coastal sites. No, it's the full supply chain is all over Europe. And I think that's very important to know. And that's why we as Commission as well can support offshore renewable. And I think that's very important to notice and to communicate as well. In the offshore renewable energy strategy, we have been considering all the different technologies because we need to think about 2050 and not just about tomorrow. If we want to have a full transition, it's not just only based on wind and PV. We need all the use of all the resources which we have. So also water and the oceans, the wave, the tides, and looking even in some islands, maybe the OTEC. But concentrating on the continent now, wave and tidal are the first ones to tackle, in fact. But you see as well that floating PV is slightly coming in. Floating wind will be more important, also thinking about the deeper waters and offshore wind, fixed bottom, we know already, and there's a lot of experience in that case. But we really have to consider all the different possibilities which we have. In this strategy, and there's really something important, it's not just about the technology as such. You're part of the system. We have to think about marine spatial planning. We have to think about the grids and the infrastructure, is that right? And why would we do this? It will help develop a new industry. It creates jobs, and research and innovation has to be done. And going into more detail, a lot of things going on, and will happen. And now we are discussing the implementation of the strategy to realize the targets. And then there are many different aspects coming in. For marine spatial planning, it's all about the multi-use. We have to deal with the fisheries. There is a public dialogue needed because it is also tourism. We think about the environment, the biodiversity. There is also, just before this webinar, I has been running from one to the other, and you know what running means now. In a meeting on restoring the health of the oceans and the sea, going to zero pollution. So in ocean energy technology development is in the ocean. So are we contributing at that as well? Decarbonization of the blue economy sectors, but no pollution, for instance. But we have to think about the infrastructure, the grids, and the market guidance, a lot of different things, and we are discussing this now internally. And indeed, enhance clean energy industrial forum to have the dialogue as well with the industry. What needs to be done to set these targets? Ocean energy pilot is one of the areas in the strategy, and I think it's one of the most complicated one in the strategy to tackle. And there's a lot of things needed for that, and it is really ambitious because when you look carefully, are we already there? And that's something about the implementation of the strategy that we are thinking about. And the organizers, Gian Maria, asked me as well, how can OceanSET help you? And in fact, what we do as well is using the data of the OceanSET in our modeling, because we would like to have, we think about 2050, but how would the system look like? We have to know if different technologies are already technology readiness, technology ready, but also market ready. When will they come into the market, depending on the cost, price, and the learning rates, and we have seen already some major results in the last years in tidal and wave energy cost reductions. We can do proper modeling, and this modeling is helping policy officers as well in making decisions, politicians to make decisions, but also investors to make decisions if it's crucial. We're going as well slightly from the demonstration to, in fact, large-scale pilot project, because 100 megawatts, if you put it in water, it doesn't mean that we want to have 200 small-scale demonstration projects. No, in fact, it's about larger pilot projects, but we need as well to know what kind of investments are needed. It's large scale, and with the data, Patricia was showing already, and I did some calculations. But when you think about that, you need €2 per watt average capital investment, which means that you need for 100 million at least 200 million capital investment to build the 100 megawatt. And should we have the operational cost, it was 32 cents per watt per year, which means an additional 300 million for the next 10 years to operate it. And for tidal, it's the same. And then you have to think as well about how much electricity will be produced and how much will be going into the system. But these numbers are very useful to safeguard or to create the right investments for the future and to create decisions and to stimulate for that. So there is an important need for reliable data and to increase credibility. This is where we are. We are really active. Last week we had an internal meeting as well on, hey, what are the next steps? What are we doing? Really pushing for the things. But it can only be in dialogue with you. That we say, okay, where are we? What do we have to do? It's not only the Commission, but it's also from the national government, and it's also from the industry, but also still some research questions are there, and that we have to challenge the scientists and the researchers to come up with solutions. This is what I wanted to contribute to this webinar. Very happy to listen to your questions and to answer. Unfortunately, I have only till 12 o'clock today. Thank you.
Thank you, Matthias. Thank you for your presentation. Questions are still coming. So this is good. But so we can move to the last presentation from Ocean Energy Europe, and the speaker is Lotta Pirtima. She is the Policy and Project Officer for the Ocean Energy Europe. She's just giving us the 2030 vision about the ocean energy. So Lotta, the floor is yours, please.
Thank you, Gian Maria. Thank you very much. Hi, everyone, from my side as well. So as Gian Maria said, I'm a Policy and Project Officer at Ocean Energy Europe, and I also manage ETIP Ocean, the European Technology and Innovation Platform for Ocean Energy. And today I will present this piece of work that ETIP Ocean did in collaboration with Ocean Energy Europe on the plans for deployments, cost reductions, and industrial growth for ocean energy by 2030. And this analysis was requested by the European Commission to feed into the offshore renewable strategy that we just heard about before. And you can find this publication on the OEE website in the publications if you're interested. Just a couple of words about ETIP Ocean before presenting that report. So ETIP Ocean is a platform that aims at accelerating ocean energy by bringing the sector together, sharing knowledge and experience, and then informing the European Commission and giving advice. And it's also part of the SET plan. So we collaborate also with the OceanSET project, like in this webinar today. Our main outputs are publications that are based on consultations and also these knowledge sharing webinars, as I mentioned. We've published a strategic research and innovation agenda lately and another report on ocean energy and the environment. Later this year, we will be looking at the economic impact and jobs of ocean energy. Now, looking at the sector today, now tidal stream is at the stage where pilot farms are being deployed. So this means 3 to 4 machines in the water for a longer period of time, so about 15 to 20 years. And this aims at really validating the technology and the performance that will then increase investor security as well. And is a way for the first gigawatts for tidal. And in 2030, we see that there will be 2.4 gigawatts of capacity deployed, and 93% of the global tidal stream deployment will be in European waters. So Europe really keeps that lead and has the strong home market before also going to export markets. This capacity will bring the costs down to 90 euros per megawatt hour. Now, what this will look like, in practice, these utility scale tidal farms will be deployed in France, in the Netherlands, in the UK, and then also in specific sites in the Mediterranean. And the capacity will continue growing with exploiting the lower flow sites with some improved technology and tidal kites. And then European companies will continue exporting to markets such as Canada, Indonesia, and Japan that we can already see today. Now, wave energy is a couple of years behind tidal. Now there are several different designs of wave energy racing to reach the market. So we have full-scale wave devices, and the pilot stage is then right after that. So that means that in 2030, we'll have just under half a gigawatt of capacity deployed. And of the global resource, again, nearly 88% will be in European waters, because wave is a much more global resource than tidal, so that percentage is a little bit lower. These deployments will bring the costs down to 110 euros per megawatt hour. And this means that there will be large-scale wave farms at utility scale all along Atlantic coast from Portugal to UK. And then smaller farms also at utility scale in Mediterranean and the North Sea. And as wave complements very nicely wind energy, there will be some floating wind co-location as well as niche market applications. So for example, decarbonizing islands, offshore platforms, or aquaculture, for example. And here the first export markets will be in the US, Chile, and India, for example. Then looking at the cost reductions a bit. So here in this curve, you can see that as the deployments grow, the cost of energy reduces significantly. And this curve really reflects the recent results from the JRC study from a couple of years ago that found out that tidal stream cost had gone down 40% in the last 30 years. So really, 3 years, sorry. So really rapid cost reductions more than was anticipated. Then finally, as part of this report, we looked at the supply chain of ocean energy. So when we say that ocean energy is a European sector, we not only mean the coastal regions or countries, but whole Europe, because the supply chain really spans across Europe. So as Matthias mentions as well, companies in even landlocked countries are and can be active in the ocean energy sector. So we have different activities like operations, which includes deployments, operations and maintenance and decommissioning. Of course, those will happen close to the resource, so close to, well, in coastal regions, essentially. And then the heavy manufacturing will happen in regions that already have that traditional maritime activity, like shipbuilding, because it needs that those skills and infrastructure to manufacture the bigger components. So that will also be probably more located in the coastal regions. But then ocean energy also uses specialized manufacturing that requires this precision and high-skill design. And it can use expertise from, for example, automobile or aerospace sectors. And this is not linked to location. So companies from countries like Germany, Sweden, Italy are already entering the sector. And then finally, of course, the sector needs other services like environmental assessments, finance, project management, and certification. And that supply chain is again all across the EU. And my final slide is about how to get there. So we have these targets and we have the cost reductions, but we can't just sit back and wait for it to happen. Luckily, the solutions are well known. First, we need clear and ambitious market signals. We need to show that there is a market to attract investors and utilities to invest to the technology. So things like the offshore renewable strategy is a good example about this. Second, we need to unlock the next phase of deployment, so demonstration and pilot projects, and revenue support will help top up the electricity price in order to pay back to investors. So that will help the project to deploy. And to support that, of course, fit for purpose planning and consenting so that you can get the project in the water faster. And emerging technology has very high cost of capital. So with the help of financial instruments, we can reduce those costs. So on top of grants, which are still very important to the sector, we need guarantees for loans and equity, and that will help projects to get the financial close. course, and finally, of course, we need to continue research and innovation to improve the technology and reduce the costs, improve the performance and reliability. Programs such as Horizon Europe, but also national and regional funding and joint goals such as the Clean Energy Transition Partnership, which is like a new Ocean Euronet. Those are very important for the sector's development. So with these measures, we will then reach that nearly 3 gigawatts of ocean energy by 2030, and that will be a good stepping stone for the 100 gigawatts by 2050. That is the sector's target. So with that, I thank you and believe we can start with the Q&A. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lotta. Thank you very much for your presentation and for your data. That seems very encouraging. So we can start the Q&A with the first question to Patricia. Actually, the first one is very, very easy. So I will give you at least 2 questions. The first one is, as you are taking 2019 figures, does UK is considered as a member state?
Yeah, it is. Yeah. So UK will be considered in the data up to the point, I suppose, of to the end of this project, actually, to the OceanSET project, because our last year of data collection will be 2020. So yeah, it's still considered as part of the member state figures.
Good. So now the other question is a little bit more complicated. Last year, OceanSET reported following figures for wave: 12.7 euro for megawatt for capex and 0.7 for the opex. Today, the figures have been reported 2.01 euro per megawatt and 0.32 for the capex. Is this correct? How this cost reduction been achieved so fast in 1 year time?
Yeah, I suppose the figures are a reflection of the data that we receive. And in last year's report, we had, sorry, I'm just going to have a quick look because I had a quick look at it there. In last year's report, we actually had half of the projects reporting to us for their data. So this is the point I was trying to make earlier on, that basically, we can only report the figures that we receive, and if projects aren't engaged and providing us with the figures, we can't include them in our analysis. So I think what we're seeing, rather than, I'd love to say yes, we're seeing significant improvements in and reductions in costs for capex and opex, but I think the reality of it is we're seeing probably more realistic figures. The more data we get from the more projects, the more confident we can be in the data. So what I would suggest is that if people or if projects and technology developers out there don't agree with the data and analysis that we are getting, we would absolutely ask you to contact us and provide us with that information, because we can only operate and work with the data that we have. And data is king here. The more data we have, the more confident we can be in the information. So I don't believe that's a reflection of the reduction in those costs, as in, OPEX and CAPEX has reduced that much for the wave and tidal sector in the last year. It's a reflection of the amount of information we had in the first year comparison to the amount of information we got in the second year, and from the number of projects. So in the first year, we received data from 12 projects. In the second year, we received data from 25 projects. So it's that's what's driving those figures.
Yeah, thank you, Patricia. Now we have a questions for Matthias. Actually, Matthias has already answered by chat, but I prefer, just to give the same answer to all the attendees. So the question is, how does the European SET plan communicate with the member state with their commitment on the target for ocean energy at political level?
Thank you, Maria. Thank you, Peter. I think there's a long process, but what we are discussing the strategies with the member states in the different settings. Think about the SET plan steering committee, the program committee on Horizon Europe, the renewable energy working parties, We have with the council meetings, but it's also important to discuss this with the European Parliament, European Economic Social Committee, with the regions, by having these dialogues. We will have as well meetings with member states individually, because they have to deliver as well the national energy and climate plans. They have to deliver as well the marine spatial plannings. And there we will have a look at, is ocean energy getting attention? Is it sufficiently considered, yes or not? And of course, you have to convince. And I think also the national governments need to be convinced that they have sufficient developers in their own country, and it is really there's a kind of push needed from yourself as well in your country. So this is what we're going to do.
Thank you, Matthias. And now a question for Lotta. Why are the 2030 deployment figure higher than the EU offshore strategy?
Yes, thank you. So our figures are higher mainly because as an industry, we can be a bit more ambitious because we know the technology and we can be, let's say, more confident about this potential. So this is what we believe in, but of course, we're happy that the Commission believes in the sector as well. And we will see who gets closer to their predictions. Thank you.
Thank you, Lotta. And now another question to Patricia. This is very interesting. Do you plan to include more regional organization in future survey? And if yes, how? Regions can have a more detailed view on ocean energy projects funded and implemented on their territories.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this year, the last period when we were collecting information, we definitely found that reaching out to the regions was really beneficial to get the information, especially, some of the more detailed information. And in a couple of situations or a couple of member states where we weren't getting, say, responses initially, we asked them to kind of identify, say, other contacts in the regions that we could go to. So we ended up then contacting those regions directly. So we are more than happy to work with the member states to understand, would they rather us contact the regions directly? We just need to get those contact points. So because this is part of the SET plan, our first port of call is the working group that's in place, or the implementation group, sorry, that's in place for the SET plan. So they are our first contact. And if we aren't getting responses back from them, we do try and dig down and contact the regions. So if there's regions that want us to contact them directly, we will certainly be happy to facilitate that, but we'll keep the SET plan contact informed of that contact as well, just to ensure that we, that we're getting as much information as we can from each country. Yeah, certainly.
Thank you, Patricia. And now we have another questions for Matthias. So the question is, how does the Ocean Energy SET plan engage with stakeholders beyond Europe, such as US and Canada?
Thank you. As Commission, we are as well part of the IEA OES, the Ocean Energy Systems, and in this technology collaboration program. And in this technology collaboration program, we are, the Americans, Canadians are present as well. And there we have the dialogue, and we are also discussing what can we do together. The IAOS is, I think, a very good tool for having these discussions. Otherwise, as well, on the international collaboration, it goes as well via mission innovation, the G20. There are many. We are having discussions as well with IRENA, with the IEA. So there are many different platforms where we are meeting the countries outside the EU. John Maria, unfortunately, I have another meeting, so I know there's some other question, but I really have to go. I'm very happy to answer as well by email. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Matthias. Thank you very much. So we can, I mean, just go ahead for other, I mean, let's say a couple of minutes, because there are many questions. So I have another question for Lotta, that is about what do you think about the co-location with offshore wind farm of other ocean energy technologies may improve the diffusion of the ocean energy sector?
Yeah, so I think that it will be a good application as well, but I think that will not be the only one. So will it improve the diffusion? It will help, of course, with the marine spatial planning or the space issue that we have, but I think this will not be the only application.
Yes, thank you, Lotte. And I mean, another question for Patricia about the deliverable 2.2. So you just mentioned the deliverable 2.2. So the question is, annual mapping and analysis reports, are these public deliverable?
No, these are reports that are developed and submitted to the Commission, and then we extract the information from them for the annual report. So there's three kind of reports that happen at the same time, looking at the mapping and kind of the outcome of the surveys, looking at the financial kind of the gap analysis, and also the monitoring report, looking at the year-on-year progress. And basically what we do is we combine the information from these three reports and put them out in the annual report. That's generally what we've done. But we're always conscious of ensuring that the information in the annual report that's out public, again, is absolutely anonymized, aggregated, and is gives I suppose a general reflection of what's going on. But no, they are internal reports.
Okay. Thank you, Patricia. And the last question for Lotta. Why does wave energy become cheaper than tidal at some point in the cost reduction graph that you have just showed before?
Yeah, thank you. So in the cost reduction curve, indeed, you could see that in the beginning, wave is more expensive than tidal, and that's because the wave energy has less convergence at present, and so that's also the reason why then subsequently wave becomes cheaper when more capacity is deployed, because there's more scope for design convergence, and it then increases in the size of individual units. So that's the reason. And just one point about the methodology of the report. You can find an annex to the report to see how we got all those figures and predictions. So go and check that out if you're interested.
Thank you, Lotte. We are very close to the end. I mean, there's also another, I mean, questions from a small, let's say, ocean energy company who are just asking how to, if there is any way to get funds from, let's say, Europe in general about this small company. So I don't know if Patricia or Lotta can answer these very, let's say, challenging questions.
I suppose I'll go first and let Lotta come in. I suppose, yeah, you know, certainly from an Irish perspective, for the smaller companies, there tends to be support for the lower TRL technologies through our funding mechanisms. And, you know, again, our understanding from what we're receiving from the member states is that that's the case, but obviously different member states have different mechanisms. I mentioned that of the member states surveyed, a high proportion had funds in place for ocean energy technologies. I think 9 of the 14. So there definitely are specific calls for ocean energy within the member states. So that would be where I would first, you know, I'd point a smaller project developer too, but there are obviously European opportunities as well, and under Horizon Europe there will be calls for wave and wave and tidal technologies. And I know, Lotta, you've been looking at that from an OEE perspective. It is I suppose that with the European calls, there are challenges in building a collaborative group in order to be successful for those calls. So for an SME, it can sometimes be challenging, but there are also tools and supports in place to help SMEs to do that. So Lotte, you might be able to point that question.
Maybe to just compliment on that. I mean, at European level, as you said, Patricia, there are specific calls that will be under the Horizon Europe program. But then the European Commission also has the European Innovation Council, for example, that has specific calls, or kind of for all technologies, but calls for lower TRLs, or like more like earlier stages of development. So you could take a look at those EIC calls as well.
Thank you, Patricia and Lotte. And if I can just also mention the Europe Wave project. That is, I mean, a European project who is trying to, funding, let's say, this new idea about ocean energy devices, so with very low TRL. So maybe you can have also looked to this very recent European project. The name is Europe Wave. So we are at the end of this very fantastic, let's say, webinar. We had more than 100 attendees. So thank you to everybody. Thank you to our speakers. And if you want to know, about the progress of OceanSET and ETIP Ocean, please have a look to our website, because in any case, we put on our websites all the, let's say, new findings. So that's all from our side, and stay safe, and ciao from Italy. Ciao.
Thanks, Gianna
Thank
Maria.
you.
Bye,
Bye.
everyone. Bye.